Today we're going live with our tech team lead, Craig Drabik from TXMQ. TXMQ is our software vendor. They've been developing Canopyright with us for over a year now, and we just launched last week, and a lot of people have questions about how it works, so we're getting the guys who built it up on stage. Hi, Nan. Hi, Wu-Tang. Hi, Jeff. Have questions, go ahead and throw them in the comments, and we will make sure to get to them. Hi, Jeff. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. I just messaged Craig. I
Okay.
think he's new to Instagram Live, so we'll see if we can get him on here.
How's it? Is it snowing in Humboldt?
It did snow.
Cool.
Just a little bit. We're pretty close to the coast where I am.
I'm seeing all these, like, my kids have still never seen snow. I'm like seeing all of these photos of like people having fun in the snow, frolicking.
Yeah, there's Craig.
That's great. This is gonna be fun. I feel like
Hi,
there's
Brad.
only hi Brad. There's only like a handful of people that have known about this project longer than Craig. Like my wife, Eleanor from LeafWorks, Dale Pun probably, Beth from Open
Yeah.
Cannabis Project. I talked to her about this at the beginning.
Uh-oh, Craig.
We lost
Craig,
Craig.
wrong button on the invite. I'll do it again,
All right,
Craig.
we'll do it again. I haven't seen Craig's face because he always does our Zooms with the camera
Uh-oh. Craig keeps pressing the wrong button.
off. Doesn't bode well for us that we having our software team is.
He spends too much time actually building things.
Hey Johnny. Hey Johnny. Today we're going to talk about how we made this thing, how it works, which is
Oh,
going to be kind of fun.
with the developer. All
Yeah, so
the
it's going to be a little bit of a different vibe, but um, I'll probably do more talking. I usually don't talk that much.
Well, Jeff, why don't you just talk about, how you, um,
Like where this all came from.
yeah, where it all came from, the origin stories.
So I met Craig or March 2020 because all of our plans got canceled. So I was like, all right, guess we're doing this. Um, I mean, the idea came out because I was working in my law practice. I was working on doing like a large strain licensing deal, and just had this thought that these people are paying this lawyer all this money to get this deal done, but really this whole process could be like completely automated. um, and if you have to put a tag on every single plant, then why can't we just treat the entire cannabis industry the same way that we do the music industry? Because really a flowering plant tag that goes into metric is kind of the same thing as a play of a song on Spotify. You can invoice the exact same way. So let's take this data that people are tracking for every single plant, and let's use it as a basis for them to get paid. But on the back end, we could also track what plants are, because really all you need is a plant sample to prove the existence of a particular plant at a particular time. Maybe prove isn't the right word. Generate evidence of the existence of a plant. Hi, Craig. So I'm dealing with this client. The clients are talking about like how their life's work is their cannabis seed library that they spent decades and decades building, and bringing a new cultivar to market, takes them 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Everyone's just always tinkering, but it's just pure exposure, because once a seed leaves your possession, well, all of your rights on it go away and are lost and gone forever. So let's come up with a better system, and let's take how the national brands are operating, where cookies will have the same strain in several different states, all through licensing deals. They don't really grow any plants. I mean, maybe they do, but that's not really their business. And let's give your average breeder that exact same ability, with this automated royalty invoicing and some data privacy, which is how I got to this, connected with Craig. So it's March 2020. I got this concept. I think it's going to work. And then then all my plans got canceled. So I write to IBM blockchain, like, I think we can do this and keep people's data private. And then they were like, we're not touching cannabis. Talk to Craig and Chuck. And that's how I got to you, Craig. So I don't even remember our initial conversation. I remember talking about the history of music licensing.
Right. I remember that too. And I remember steering you away from IBM in that first conversation as well, because it wasn't a great fit for what you were trying to do.
So a little bit about your background to get started, and then what it was, what made you decide to build it the way that you did, according to what Jeff came to you asking for.
Sure. So I guess we'll get the introductions out of the way. I'm Craig Drabik. As of a couple of days ago, I'm now CTO of TXMQ. TXMQ is a, thank you. We are a boutique software and solutions provider. We go back to the 1970s, I believe, certainly before me. And our traditional business was a lot of middleware, message queuing. That's how we got the name. Things like that, working with big banks, airlines, other large enterprise customers. And Chuck Freed, the president and CEO of the company, had this idea that he wanted to try to play with this new distributed ledger technology, which was where I came in, and joined the company about 5 years ago and started figuring all this stuff out and building applications. Before that, I was with KPMG, and before that with a boutique software company called Synergy, doing web and mobile design and development. So that's
and then when Jeff came and asked you guys what you would do to build this, why did you guys decide to build it the way you did, and can you summarize that?
Yeah, sure. So the idea, first of all, the idea was solid and very interesting. And sorry, I'm working with a not quite optimal camera setup here. First of all, the idea was interesting, and we agreed that it sounded like it could work. We liked the idea that it focused more on the intellectual property side of the business rather than on business to consumer, direct sales, or things like that, which are obviously a bit stickier from the regulatory aspect. From there, it honestly wasn't very different to any other build in terms of how we would approach it. You take what the customer is telling you their requirements are, and the standouts for this one was really the privacy. I think what Jeff said to us was, I don't want to be able to see anybody's data. And I thought, that's interesting. How would I build a system where the people who own the system don't have access to the data? Which led us to looking at various encryption mechanisms and ultimately to the design that we had. The other great fit was obviously on the blockchain. I'll put blockchain in air quotes, on the blockchain or distributed ledger side, with being able to prove provenance on documents, right? And being able to say that at a certain point in time, these documents were in the system's possession, they looked like this, and they, in the future, if there's a dispute, we can provide some kind of additional backup that what the breeder is saying is actually true, rather than in court it being a he said, she said. We can look at the ledger, we can get a record of the document itself, or I should say the hash of the document. So way of boiling the document down to a small payload that is unique to the document. Let's say that's an oversimplification. But if I can show that at a certain point in time, this piece of data hashed looked like this, and that's registered on a ledger where it can't be changed, then I can take that same document at any point in the future, rehash it, compare the hashes, and I can determine whether or not that document has been changed. So that's key in an IP dispute, where somebody may say, well, I developed that strain in 2016. Now we would actually have a record that strain was developed in 2016. Documentation existed for that in 2016, and here's what that documentation
Cool.
looked like.
And talk about metric, because that was kind of like the fun. I just remember you sent me that like diagram with like breeder and grow. We were calling it breeder and grower back then, and there was like all the little like
yeah.
We
still refer to it as that internally. So the metric angle was pretty interesting. I think the platform works in the sense of providing IP protection, and to some extent would still work for certain types of licensing arrangements. But I thought that the idea of being able to actually pay for the number of plants that were derived from a specific strain, and being able, or cultivar, and being able to then calculate a royalty based on the number of plants that were actually grown was a really interesting idea. Basically, you only pay for what you need, right? Like the Liberty Mutual commercials. You're only paying for the plants that you're growing. And the way to do that was to tie into Metric, the state track and trace system in California and in many other states. So what we can do then is look for new flowering plants that show up in Metric for a particular grower, and tie those back to the licensing agreements that we have between breeders and growers, and then calculate how much royalty is actually owed based on the number of plants that are produced, instead of a more one-size-fits-all license, which the system does have. You can opt for a one-time license as a breeder, or as a grower if the breeder is offering a one-time license. But if you're only growing a handful of plants versus you're growing an entire farm full of plants, right, that's obviously two different use cases and probably deserve two different prices. So I think it's a good way to not lose money when you're licensing to large operation, while still enabling you to continue to license to smaller operations as well, and treat everybody fairly.
So why did you guys end up going with Hedera, and how does Hedera work?
The number one reason we went with Hedera was cost. Transacting on most blockchains, this is changing to some extent, but especially on Ethereum, is very expensive compared to Hedera. So the cost for us to register a hash for a document on Hedera is in the area of 1/10 of a cent per document. So we're actually able to give Jeff the ability to run this system without passing those costs on to the people using the system, because the fees for what we need to do with the ledger are so inexpensive on Hedera. That was the number one
part of our
answer.
initial call
The
was,
second,
and I don't want to charge anyone. I want to make this free.
yeah, and with that in mind, right? Like I said before, it's a matter of customer communicates requirements, and I try to fit those requirements as best I can. But the best way to do that was to go with a platform with very low fees, and Hedera is about the lowest you can get. It's also very easy with Hedera Consensus Service to do this kind of document provenance. It's a very simple on the technical side to just create the hashes and pass them through a Hedera consensus topic versus, you know, if we were doing this on Bitcoin, we'd have to do something with memo fields and small crypto exchanges and things like that because it's just not as programmable. On Ethereum, we'd probably be looking at a smart contract or similar to the Bitcoin approach, which is going to be much more expensive. And at the time we were looking at this, a lot of the chains that sort of compete against Hedera in terms of cost were really very, very early on in their cycle. And finally, I am a Hedera MVP. We do have a really close relationship with Hedera. So we know the people, we know the technology, we knew it was a good fit, we knew it fit the price profile. So it was a no-brainer decision.
Price profile. That's a good way to describe broke. For everyone on the line, this project is entirely self-funded. We don't have a dime of outside investor money. So keeping costs manageable has been very important to everyone this entire time. We've got a question about how user keys are stored and generated. I don't know if you want to address that now or you want to talk about it later. And maybe we should talk
user
about,
keys?
What a user key is first. Maybe let's start for non-software people like myself.
Yeah, okay. So I'll start with what the purpose of those keys are in the system, and then we'll go into how they're generated, stored, and used. So in Canopyright, the purpose of an encryption key is to make sure that when you upload a document, when you enter into a contract, when you negotiate a contract, and there's a handful more places where we're doing this, we're using those keys in a way where you, if you're a breeder and you register a cultivar and you upload a series of documents, those documents are encrypted with your individualized key. So comparing that to a system that you would have built 5 or 10 years ago, or a system that wouldn't implement this kind of encryption, your standard garden variety enterprise software package, right? That stuff goes into a database. The database is usually encrypted. There's one key basically for the entire database, right? So if you have access to the database and you have row level access to the record, you can read all the data. And you kind of need that, right? So if you're familiar with Canopyright, you've been in the system, you look at a cultivar and you can see that there are 3 or 4, however many documents. You can see what type of documents they are. You can see the names of the documents. If they're private, you can't see the contents of those documents. And the contents of those documents are kept private with an encryption key that's individualized to you. So if I don't have the key, and I'm speaking as me as the guy who built the system, or Jeff as the guy who runs the system, if we don't have that key, we can't decrypt that data, right? So that's how we're keeping private information private. And again, that's primarily documents. It's contract negotiations and contracts for the most part. Most of the data around those operations are kept private this way. If you share that information, or if there are 2 parties that have access to that information, like in a contract, you have a breeder and a grower engaged in a contract, each person basically gets their own copy of that data encrypted with their own key, so they can only see their copy of that data with their own key. The keys are not used in a way that you would typically associate with cryptocurrency or blockchain. There's no transaction signing that's happening implicitly on your behalf. We're not spending anybody's cryptocurrency. We're not even using cryptocurrency except to pay the Hedera network fees for running things through HCS. And so in order to keep the system easy to use, those keys are generated when you create your account on the server, stored in the database. Those keys are individually encrypted using the user's password. So unless the user logs in, there's that brief period of time in the code where the system has access to a user's password to authenticate them. At that point, if the authentication is successful, we use the password to decrypt the key. We hold the key while you're in session, and when your session expires, the key vanishes. We no longer have, we meaning the system, the software system, no longer has access to that private data, which is, again, your contracts, your contract negotiations, and your private documents.
Okay.
So that didn't answer your question. Ask a follow-up question. And then we have another question from Johnny. Is it possible for other cultivators to have a registered or protected, have registered or protected their cultivars in a different system that can refute the Canopyright documentation? This is more of a...
I think that's a me question.
Yeah.
Holland. I mean,
take it.
Yes, if you're lying. If you gave your plants to Medicinal Genomics 10 years ago and you said it was Kelsey's Kush, and then you named a different plant Kelsey's Kush and put it into Canopyright, and then now there's two versions of something that you're claiming are the same thing. Presumably, I guess somebody could send something. I mean, I think legally it's a little bit complicated what Medicinal Genomics could release to a third party. So like maybe there's some confidentiality aspects that would prevent it from happening. But really what we're doing, and this is part of what Craig is speaking to with the privacy features, is it's really just to protect you. Like this is a tool for breeders to protect themselves. We can't access any of your data. That's like kind of the point. But like really philosophically is that we're really trying to give breeders a tool to establish their own provenance in their cultivars, and not necessarily having something that third parties could use offensively against you. I hope that was I don't know, that was maybe a lawyerly answer, but it's really, it's a tool for you to protect yourself. And so the ways that it could be used against you is if you are lying about what it is that you said you put into Canopyright. Is the blockchain system universal? Yep, you can use it anywhere in the world. We'll figure out how to tie into other blockchain systems eventually. So if somebody has a pre-roll of White Thorn Rose, you can get it automatic royalty generated for you. So that'd be dope. But we're not quite there yet. But that's really the dream one day. Or like point of sale, if you fill out a survey, somebody buys an eighth of White Thorn Rose from a dispensary, and they get an ad on their phone, fill out a survey, how did this make you feel? And then all of a sudden you can aggregate anonymous data, everyone in the supply chain, the distributor, the manufacturer, or whatever, everyone can pay for the cost of that data. And all of a sudden you have this completely private system, but it actually like works to show the health outcomes of your product and gives you a royalty at the ultimate point of sale from the dispensary. So there's lots of ways that we could interoperate what we've built. Craig's like looking at me. I don't know. Craig, shake your head yes or no if I fuck this up. But there's lots of ways that you could interoperate.
No, I think that's
with other blockchain
systems.
Yeah.
Finish up your thought. Yeah, I was just going to say, for anybody who's heard me speak on Canopyright before, or cannabis in general, as an IT person, I find this space, first of all, fascinating because it's cannabis and it's fascinating, but it's not an established market where people have to accommodate a legacy banking system, for example, or fight against Oracle or IBM for market share, or deal with all sorts of established technology, right? And so it gives us a real clean sheet of paper opportunity to say, okay, given the market that we have, what are the best solutions today in 2023 that we can try to bring to bear? And that's really about, you know, the win-win kind of things. If we can reduce friction in the marketplace, if we can enable data sharing in a way where everybody's privacy is respected, even in terms of regulation, right? Like I just explained how with a private key setup, public-private key encryption, that we can make things private. We can share copies of that are private to people. You can use the same techniques to for example, validate that somebody has a license to sell, right? So you want to know that the person you're buying from is legit licensed proprietor. Or on the opposite side, you go into a dispensary and they need to know that you're of a certain age, right? So today we would hand over our driver's license and we expose our names, we expose our addresses, we expose our driver's license numbers, we expose a whole bunch of things that don't contribute to answering the question of, is this person old enough to purchase this product, yes or no? So we can really use these technologies to enable those interactions in a way that actually protect people's privacy and enable the regulators to do the things that they're claiming they're trying to do by keeping people safe and keeping things out of the hands of children and things like that. We can do a lot of those things with better privacy than we're doing them today. And in a space where there's really no established players, that's much easier to do.
I see a question. I don't know if this is a question. You could also license farmers to grow your strain as a brand, like a bailment contract. So bailment contracts are, you drop off your dry cleaning, the dry cleaner is a bailee. They are responsible for your, I don't know, your wedding suit if the dry cleaner burns down, but you hold title to that, you hold title to your suit. I'm not sure how that works in this context, because a farmer would grow your strain. You wouldn't really, I guess you could say that you hold title to the farmer's possession. That's really not contemplated in our terms of use, but yeah, theoretically we could help you structure that contract. Your agreement, the brand to grower contract is not covered under our terms of use, but the buyer to seller contract is. I hope that answers the question.
Next question would be, and I hope I did skip anyone here, but what about the Hedera transactions help the user's IP protections?
Good question. So stop me if this gets a little too nerdy. When you submit a document, like say a genetic profile or your breeder notes or anything that helps to support an IP claim, right? We take that data, we run it through what's called a hashing function, which is a fancy way of saying we take a big chunk of data and we condense it down into a small chunk of data. And that's done in a way, there are two important aspects to that. One is that it is one way. So if I take a PDF file and I hash it down, I cannot reconstitute the original PDF file from the hash. That's a cryptographically secure hash. That's the term we would use as software people. The second thing that is important about hashing is that if anything changes, any small amount of data changes in that PDF document, the generated hash is also going to change. So by taking the hash and putting it through Hedera consensus service, a permanent timestamped record of that hash is created on the ledger. So when you upload a document to Canopyright today at 7:29 Eastern Time on February 15th, 2023, that timestamp and that hash are permanent and unmodifiable on Hedera. So in the future, if there's a dispute to say, well, you didn't actually own this, I own this, I developed it at this point, the person who registered that document can take the original document, rehash it, compare that hash to the hash that's on the ledger. And if they match, then we can say that those two documents, that document that you just rehashed is the same data as the document that created the hash in the first place. And by knowing when that hash was created on the ledger, we can establish when you were in possession of that IP. So if you were to put your genetic test or genetic profile of a strain or whatever documentation you had today, I can tell you at any point in the future, if you give me that document, and I know the Hedera transaction ID that goes with that document, I can tell you whether or not that's been modified. So when you're presenting a piece of paper, it's sort of the equivalent of publishing that in the New York Times, right? Somebody can go back to the New York Times from 10 years ago and see that this particular document was published in the paper. Therefore, it was in the public domain. Everybody knew it existed and everybody knew who submitted it. So that's what we get out of Hedera in the context of this application.
To follow what Craig said so excellently, the purpose of establishing your plant sample in your tamper evident package is that it creates, sorry, I'm just looking at the comments. It creates a record that helps you establish prior art. So Monsanto says, well, and this is what Monsanto does to corn farmers, well, by virtue of you growing this product, your soybeans are similar to our soybeans, therefore we own your soybeans, therefore you can't grow them. What we're doing is giving you a defense to, one, the Monsanto claim, but two, the very concept that Monsanto could own a soybean that's similar to your soybean. So obviously we're not talking about soybeans, we're talking about cannabis, but it's the same concept. Okay. Hopefully, Kelsey, are you manning the questions? Because we're getting a lot of them.
I'm watching them.
Protection is derived from a contract, not intellectual property legislation. Ooh, question for me. Yes, that's exactly what we are doing. And it's not mutually exclusive, right? You have a patent from the Patent and Trademark Office. You can put that in your Canopyright profile, and the difference between what an intellectual property registration, like a plant patent, would do versus what we're doing is it gives you a third-party right to shut somebody's farm down. So it gives you the Monsanto rights, that Canadian movie about the corn farmer. I don't know if any of you guys saw this a long time ago, but that's really Christopher Walken, I think. But yeah, that's really what we're doing, is giving you that piece of protection. And just to be clear, this is like kind of how the entire industry operates. Like, you know, we gave the cookies example earlier, but like if you think about the brands that are in various states where the brand doesn't really grow plants, they license intellectual property. It's all based in contract rights. Like, I don't know if cookies holds patents over their strains. Maybe they do, but probably they don't. Certainly they don't over the entire portfolio. You don't need to have a patent, or I don't know, in other countries there's different plant breeders' rights, and that's a whole other Zoom. But you don't need to have established government intellectual property protection to get paid for a plant cultivar. I guess that's my point. Sorry, do we have a next question here?
I like the breeder syndicate. Because none of us on this team are breeders, and he wants to know what made non-breeders want to protect breeders' IP. I think all of us should answer that question.
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Well, I did it because I'm a second generation cannabis community member, and I've been around this plant my entire life. And as legalization approached, I saw the people that had the magic, meaning I have friends who have studied their cultivars for over 30 years, and they have documentation that it stops things that I can't mention on here, not to put anybody in trouble, but you know, real research, real information, real medicine. And I saw all that not being honored and not really being understood. I have friends who are in their 70s who are losing their homes, and yet this industry was literally the indoor industry that we're in, because most of the genetics come from that indoor industry that are in the market today, were built on a lot of these people's collections. So I have a lot of heart around saving the people around this. And I'm a patient. And from a patient's perspective, I have a spinal cord injury. And this plant is the reason that I get to engage and be a part of a company like Canopyright and do this stuff. And my genetics matter. I was an indoor grower. I was a vertical indoor grower. Again, the genetics matter. So I just think it's a conversation that the world is just beginning to have, yet we have generations of experience, and Canopyright is the tool that not only protects us, but allows us to build the information around that experience, which I think in the future is going to be the second most valuable thing in this industry. So that's me. That's why I'm doing this.
The second most valuable thing?
The first is the plant itself.
Got it. I'm doing this because just seemed like the Wild West of IP rights. It's everyone has a story about getting ripped off, and there's just this clear, obvious, better way for just like cannabis breeders to operate. Like, I genuinely believe that if people adopted this system, it would make everyone's life easier. Everyone wins. It's better medicine because, you know, that cultivar that you had that made your nausea just cease out of the blue one day, well, you know where to find that. You can find the breeder. The breeder can really build a brand around it without having to spend 50 grand to get a utility patent. And it gives people, just like for very low cost, it gives people a way to establish their hard work, as opposed to really the Wild West. Somebody could buy a seed pack that could grow 10 plants or 10 million plants, but the person who spent 10 years developing the cultivar only got paid at the first point of sale. And like, you're not going to actually sue somebody unless they get rich off of it, right? Like, this isn't you're not going to sue somebody over $1,000 because you got ripped off. But like, I think for the industry and for everyone that we work with, like, the fact that you could have a recourse if you get ripped off as opposed to none is valuable. That's why I'm doing this.
And I'll just try to put mine in a nutshell. Lawyers are super expensive. If we can, sorry, Jeff, everybody hates lawyers. If we can find a way to automate lawyers, disrupt that whole expense, like, let's do that. I'm an innovator. I'm an artist. I like to see artists get paid fairly. This is all that. And also, I'm so tired of Facebook and putting your data out everywhere, and I'm ready for us to move towards data privacy, and this is a platform that does that.
I've got a quick answer to this one too. I mean, the hard knocks of it is it's my job and I got hired and this is what I do for a living. But on top of that, I'm sitting in my home music studio. I'm a musician on top of that. And I try to think about, fairness, and I could write a song and I could play it in public and never record it. Somebody could record that song on their phone, go off and have a hit record with it. And what do I get, right? I haven't been treated fairly. And I would hate to see other people get treated that way. I would hate to see people get ripped off. I would hate to see people lose access to their medicine for people who are using cannabis medicinally. I also share Kelsey's concerns about the ethical use of information technology. And so for me, this project wraps all of those things up into something that I can really get behind, not only professionally, but personally as well. And I do have an interest in seeing this succeed beyond just it's my job to make the best software application that I can for my customers. I believe in the idea, and I believe in fairness, and I believe in protecting people's rights. And it's nice to be able to have the opportunity to participate in something
All right,
simple.
We're all Breeder Syndicate. We're all cannabis industry people since before this project, except for Craig.
I'm not.
Okay.
How do users know where to find their data on the Hedera ledger? Is it tied to the user key so that they can independently verify the data locally with their key? Question mark.
That is an excellent question. No, it is not tied to an individual user's key. The system in the back end in the database, we have the Hedera transaction ID that corresponds to each document or each exchange in a contract negotiation or each contract, right? So the data that makes up each of those examples is hashed and passed through Hedera, so later on it can be proven. I'm sorry, I confused encryption with the Hedera piece. It's just the documents. So your strain photo, your custody photos, your photos of your samples in a baggie, and your documents all go through Hedera. The technology is relatively straightforward to take the information from the document and the hash on Hedera and compare them. We have not yet built that into the system, but that is a feature that we're discussing. Frankly, I've built that into systems 3 or 4 times in the past, and it has seemed very important, and not a whole lot of people have wound up using it. But I do feel that it is important, and obviously if you were going to go to court, it's something you would want to be able to demonstrate to the court. We can do that on a case-by-case basis, assuming you provide us with the original data, right? If it's a private document, I can't get the data, so I'd have to have the owner of that information provide it to me. Then I could hash it and compare it to the transaction on the ledger. But it's a good point that without that transparency, end users of the platform don't have the ability today to do that themselves, and I think that's a whole
it's
that
definitely
we're looking
something
at
we're going to
plugging.
have to building eventually. And also, I just want to say as like a general comment, we're bound by our privacy policy. So like when we say we're not looking at your data, like that's a legal statement that we're making. Okay. Oh, I like this one. With 95+% of seed makers out there being opportunists, how do we, being new to this world of cannabis breeding, navigate that? Can I answer this one? Because I love this question. We don't. I mean, we don't. We built this thing and we released it to the world, and people are going to use it how they use it, and then we're going to adapt. We built this tool that allows for people to like put their trust, because no one's really looking under the hood at their data, and be able to engage in business. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but we think it's going to work based on everyone we've talked to, which is now hundreds of people.
And I want to add that when we utilize the data pieces like the COAs, like, you know, a couple years of COAs, a couple years of R&D, years of pictures, documentation on how you grew it. When you start putting all those pieces together around the cultivar, the plant speaks for itself. So we envision that folks come in here not looking for, oh, you know, one of my least, I love the strain, but I hate the name, green crack, okay? Like, they're not going to come in and look for green crack. They're going to come in and look for a really cool, probably high CBG profile with THC and a little pinene, and, you know, then they're going to pop. Whoever meets those needs, that cultivar will show up with that information that supports it.
Ooh, this leads, can we keep going? I like these Breeder Syndicate questions. Can we keep on going with these?
Pat has a question
oh, wait,
too.
sorry. Oh wait, okay. So if an infringement occurs in a different territory, so the protection depends on libel law, and same for the calculation of damages and remedies, we can't, I mean, there's a lot of countries in the world and we can't speak to the laws in each of the countries. I mean, I don't want to sound dismissive of the question, but I also don't think that's, oh, Layla, you're on mute. I don't want to sound dismissive of the question, but it's also not something that I can answer because it's too broad. Okay, now can I go to the second question about people getting ripped off? My second question, people being ripped off in this industry, how do you all navigate that very real aspect of this world? It's a closed community inside of a closed community. I mean, what we're doing is just giving you a cheap, and by cheap, I mean essentially free. You have to buy evidence bags on Amazon, but an essentially free way to document your possession of a particular plant at a particular time and enter into contracts with other people to grow that plant from their fund. So people are going to use it however they use it, but that's what we built. So, you know, if you're not going to take someone to court over $1,000, and so there is limited recourse. Like we're not really building in a tribunal. We don't have like a enforcement division. But what we do have is just a little piece of technology that allows you to protect yourself for very little cost. That's my answer. Does anyone else want to answer that one? Because I like that question.
I'm lost on where we're at the questions because the radio station just called me and told me my show's tomorrow night, not tonight. So sorry, I'm lost.
Just what are we doing? What are we doing about this industry where people get ripped off?
Oh man, well I've had my own genetics. I didn't make them, someone made genetics that were like made to help recreate the feeling that I share with people. And so this is how, like, there was no other way to create accountability. Believe me, we've all been looking for it for years. And I think as the industry evolves, that this will also evolve. But I mean, this is to me what I've seen, and I'm what, 52 years old, and I've been around this plant my whole life. This is the first way. I mean, we couldn't mail our leaves to us like a manuscript, but now we basically can. So it's the beginning. We can't go backwards, but I mean, I feel like we're doing something about it, and I hope a lot more things get done about it. But there's not much out there but to do it. And I'd like to say there's another way, actually, which I feel like we're doing as well as a team, and which is one of the reasons that I really am stoked to be a part of this, is when you have integrity and you're true to that integrity, you're backing yourself up. So in Canopyright, if you just throw a strain in there and you don't have labs, R&D, historical documentation, and someone does throw that strain in there that has all of that information and all of that data, well, you just screwed yourself because you didn't really have what you needed to back it up, and someone else did. So I think by creating layers of accountability, which is what we're trying to do with Canopyright, and if we do that all with each other, I mean, back in the day, man, if you screwed your neighbor over, you went to jail. Like, this stuff did not happen. And we need to get back to that place. But this is a system that helps us do that.
Would we be interested in a free open source being built for non-metric users? So we've been talking with the copyleft cultivars folks for a while, and that's a lot of like what they're doing is the sort of open source version, and we're gonna incorporate the bag tags concept into what we're doing eventually. But I think for at least for us for this little project is we kind of wanted it to be like very private, and so we haven't really thought through like an open source project, because that's kind of not what we're doing. This is a closed source, extremely private project. Is closed source a word? Do people say that? Craig? Okay.
People do say that, yes. But I guess I would say this project is technically a closed source project, as well as I think the aspect of what Jeff is talking about, where the, let's say the commercial aspects of the platform are an attraction to some people, right? And the people I think that will really connect with and make use of Canopyright are people who are interested in protecting their IP so that they don't get ripped off, right? It's sort of the opposite of an open source community where the idea is really to share things out into the world. For the record, love open source software, use tons of it all the time, have contributed to and published open source projects. They just typically market to slightly different constituencies, I think. And I think the analogy holds true for the users of Canopyright as well. At least that's my take as the developer.
Okay, so what happens? We don't operate in Cambodia or China. Please don't use Canopyright in Cambodia or China. If you're in a jurisdiction where the courts won't respect your contract rights on Canopyright, then I don't. There's nothing we can do. If the law won't respect our product, then it doesn't. That's the answer, I guess. We don't. That's offensive. I don't what? I'm not quite understanding this comment about Phylus. We have no affiliation with Phylus in any way.
In fact, that comment is one of the reasons that we're not open source. I come from a community, and I think a lot of you do too, that are on here, that we've had to really protect ourselves. And when that happened, people were starting to actually get their things looked at, and we need our things looked at. We need to be able to engage with science. But after that incident, I know a lot of people really pulled back from doing those sort of things, and that hurt us. And this is a way that gives the breeder the choice to go to a DNA tester. I mean, there's a ton out there. I won't name any names, but to go to a lab and get that work done and have another layer of accountability around it.
We've got a bunch of. I think somebody else needs to decipher all of these comments from Breeders Syndicate, or we can just come up. Do you want to just come on stage? I gotta get my kids in 10 minutes. So, do we have any questions here? I'm seeing comments.
Let's not. Yeah, I want to make sure we get everybody before you guys go. You guys are.
Phylus being closed source was the problem. I think we should probably address the differences between Canopyright and what Phylus was doing.
So, I don't even know where to start with that.
Well, here, I can talk about it from the community perspective.
Okay.
That's easier. So the difference is one of the really big difference. And let me tell you something, you guys. I know Mowgli. I talked to Phylus. They actually came to me in 2014. So I get it. I really, really get it. And I can't even tell you, I've even had the money that one of those companies has come to me and want to back me. Okay. So I really get it. And I feel very responsible to my elders in my community who have some really special things. And the difference is that Canopyright does not touch your DNA. You hold on to it. All of this is kind of like establishing a chain of custody, or you're creating your time capsule, but you hold on to it. So I can't steal your plant material unless I come to your house and I break into your freezer or wherever you choose to store it, or how you choose to store it, and take it from you. But that is all in your hands. So I would say that's probably like the biggest thing for, the folks that I work with.
And also, I mean, that's distinction number one. Number two is that if you want to keep something private, it stays private even from us. So if you want to use Canopyright as your own private archive, then we don't actually get to see it. It's just you're timestamping your plant samples for your own benefit, and it has nothing to do with us. We don't charge you for it either. So I would say that's a distinction. And then we don't actually look at any of your transaction records. So any data that you choose to keep private is private from us, but also if somebody's growing your genetics in their garden and they're generating a royalty, if they owe us an admin fee, then we'll know that somebody owes us an admin fee, but we won't know why because we can't look at invoices. It's based on a percentage of what the total cost is. So we really actually have very little insight into what exactly it is that you're doing. And that's really the goal, is to lock ourselves out, is to give us a mechanism to process royalty transactions from a fee, but we don't actually have any insight into who's doing business with who.
Do you see the providing third-party genetic IP protection? I think that's what you're doing, and we hold on to all the keys.
Do you want to talk about us holding on to keys, Craig?
Sure. We do hold the keys to decrypting private documents. This is true. We store those keys in a manner in which they are not accessible to us. As I described earlier on in the call, the key is only available while you're logged in. It's available to the system. It's not written to disk anywhere unencrypted or in plain text. It's not sent to the browser. It's not shared with anybody. And in that period of time, the system on your behalf uses your key to decrypt your own private information. It is true that in a cryptocurrency system like a crypto wallet, if you're in the crypto community or familiar with it, you probably heard the phrase, not your keys, not your coins. That is good advice in the crypto community. If a third party holds your keys and they're accessible to that third party, then that third party can access your information. The approach that we're taking it's a good analogy because the approach that we're taking to storing keys is very similar to what would happen on a site like Coinbase, which is custodial. They hold the keys. You don't have to hook up a MetaMask or a hardware wallet or something like that to sign transactions locally. Coinbase is holding those keys to transact for you. Mostly that's done for technical and performance reasons. If the system was built that way, probably nobody would want to actually use it. It would be too slow and too difficult to use. So there was a compromise there between ultimate security and usability that we think is appropriate to the goals of the system and the type of data that's being held in it. I guess I would say if you're looking at the key storage mechanism and that makes you a little bit nervous, I would say don't start from the standpoint of thinking of this as a crypto system and comparing it to that. Start by thinking of a Google Drive or your doctor's electronic health record system, where those systems are typically built with a shared encryption key for the entire system in most cases. This is a step better than that, but not a system where keys are held outside of the system and never transmitted to the system.
Yeah,
so
I
that
guess
is
I just want to say
go ahead,
that
Jeff.
it's a question of what your goals are. Our goals are to keep people's transactions private and to keep people's data private. We're not a bank. We're not housing nuclear codes. We're trying to take the Phylos debacle, turn it inside out so that we're keeping people's data private, but also still letting them get paid. So yes, we are not, there's no cryptocurrency. That's just not what we do. We don't process payments between our buyers and our sellers. We just send invoices. So really the system is designed to just allow people to do business with each other and get paid. We don't handle the payment part, but we do handle the doing business part.
And you guys will correct me if I say this wrong, but this isn't any one particular system. This is something that you're looking at the people who put it together. Primarily, Craig is the developer around it, that we're putting through the patenting process. So this isn't anything of those crypto, but it's a combination. There's a lot of pieces of those, from someone who's not, I know about crypto probably like most people who've been on the free market long enough. But it takes a lot of those pieces, but it's its own unique system.
Yeah, we were just trying to accomplish
Right.
like a very specific
That's
program
accurate.
of like letting people track plant samples and negotiate deals on their phone. So I think when you think about how it was set up, it was really set up to allow for that to happen in the most user-friendly way possible. So Wu-Tang Flan, if you can hack our system and don't want to use it accordingly, then understood. But we think that this provides a tremendous amount of value because it allows you to document everything in your catalog with really no upfront cost and potentially get paid for it. And that's really our goal. That's our little mission.
Built just for it.
Yeah.
Which is, it's needed in this industry. There was nothing like it, and it was needed. So
cool. We're at 5.
Did we? And I think we got through most. I don't know, because there's a lot, and if we didn't answer anything, you guys, first of all, shoot us a note, and the right person will get you back the information. And I think just from the results of this conversation, we should do this again.
Yeah, we might have to do a version 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to start putting our videos like this, you guys, up on YouTube. So I want to get this up on YouTube as soon as possible, because I didn't get to see the beginning, and I want to share it with more people. So you can catch up on it there too as well. But please keep asking your questions. Send them to us in the IG. And we really are here to just find solutions to this crazy world, not create more problems for anybody.
Yeah. All right. Well, take care, everyone. I am going to go pick up my kids from school.
All right. Blessings, you guys. I'm still
Thanks,
confused
everyone.
on these comics that we'll talk.
Yeah. I'm like, just reach out to us directly. It'll be easier.
Yeah, totally.